You can be a feminist if you don't believe in progress, and furthermore, if you want to be a feminist, you shouldn't believe in progress. Was the conclusion I came to in the end.
Hello, and welcome to the 12 Days of Tradmas. If you're new around here, my name is Kit, and Tradmas is a series I do in December where I talk about the harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. Basically, my normal content, but more of it and with a festive flair. And today we have Mary Harrington as I try once more to understand what reactionary feminism is. I did find an interview with Louise Perry, which I had high hopes for, but it didn't seem very informative, and so I found this interview instead. It's an older one, taking place in 2024 with Lila Rose, but I'm still puzzled over this whole business. Or I don't want to admit that reactionary feminism is just telling women to get married, never divorce, and don't use birth control. Yeah, I'm really struggling to see where the feminism part comes in, so I must be misunderstanding something. Maybe if I read her book? Anyway, the interview starts with Mary's background, and she states that she was very leftist, and I'm so curious as to what that means. And it might be worth pointing out that Mary is British, so her idea of very leftist and an American's might differ, but I would still like some examples of what beliefs she had in her leftist days and how they differ to her beliefs now. Anyway, she was kind of nuts in her 20s, her words, not mine, by which she means very leftist, and she lived in an experimental way, and we'll just leave it there. Her decision, not mine. And then at the end of her 20s, her life fell apart, and she questioned everything she had previously believed. Then she got married, and she credits the thing that really changed her outlook on life on becoming a mom.
When it came to it, when I realised I had the choice, I was fortunate to have the choice because of how things were for us financially, about whether or not I wanted to go back to work. And I realised I've done all of these jobs and I sucked at all of them. And there is literally nothing that anyone could offer to pay me to do that I could realistically do that I want to do more than being with my baby. And I realised that the fact that I was in that position made me that didn't make me oppressed, that made me lucky relative to a lot of the women who'd been my peers in antenatal groups.
That's fair, and for the record, I don't believe stay-at-home parents are just parents. Not participating in paid employment doesn't make anyone worth less or anything like that. The concern is that doing so puts you in a precarious financial position. Moving on, so far as I can piece together, Mary was living a bohemian life in her 20s, and then it fell apart around the time of the financial crash, which also happened to be the time she met her future husband. She retrained as a psychotherapist, which involved a lot of personal work, and by the time she was married with the kids, she was 38, so none of this was overnight. Okay. I wish she could detail her beliefs as well as she does her life story, but anyway, skipping over the rest.
I realised that, from the perspective of a young woman who's maybe ambitious, who has big dreams about life, who maybe doesn't feel safe walking down the street at night, a whole host of different, who feels uncomfortable in her body, as I really did in my teens and early 20s, is very ambivalent about sex roles and gender roles, and all of this stuff, which is very common now. I guess I was I was kind of an early adopter of most of that stuff, but it made when I became a mum, I realised that a lot of that stuff is very ungrounded if it's not understood in the context of why women are different to men. It sounds so obvious when you say it like that, but the differences between men and women are very embodied and very basic. And in some ways, they don't matter a whole lot. In other ways, they matter immeasurably and completely change how you experience life. I mean, having a child was obviously a very different experience for me and for my husband. But it also completely changed the way I thought and felt.
I'm going to need Mary to explain to me why the differences between men and women were what led to Grandma cooking Thanksgiving dinner and myself and my mom cleaning up after it while the men watched football. Anyway, Mary goes on to tell us she's been driving for 24 years and the only time she's crashed a car was when she's had a hungry baby screaming in the back and she just couldn't think. I would think having a baby in the backseat would make you drive more carefully, though I have no doubt a screaming baby would be distracting. But now we're getting to it.
And all of this stuff was completely new to me, and it led me to re-examine some of the basic beliefs which I'd always taken for granted as kind of foundational to feminism, that men and women are basically the same, apart from some kind of slightly different topography and slightly different genitals. So we're basically the same kind of creature. That we should be aiming for the same things, that our political priorities can and should be broadly the same, and that maybe being a woman is basically like being a man but on hard mode. That was I suppose the kind of unexamined premise, and then that got overlaid with a whole load of critical theory and Judith Butler at university, which led me to imagine that maybe I could LARP my way out of it.
LARP her way out of what? Being a woman? I have to admit, nothing I've read or discussed or anything inform me that feminism is about womanhood being manhood on hard mode. I'm very curious as to how Mary drew that conclusion, but it is nice to know what she thought feminism was, instead of being left to guess like we usually are.
I mean, I sincerely tried. In a kind of playful way, I tried LARPing my way out of gender roles and expectations. I don't think I was ever that committed to the bit, but not like the kids are now. But I tried just to see what would happen, and it turned out that doesn't really work either, and there really is something irreducible underneath it.
I'm sorry. Does Mary think that if someone doesn't follow gender roles, or doesn't believe in them, or both, it's because they're trying to LARP their way out of them, and they're just more committed to it than Mary was? Let me know in the comments. Is it just me, or is that reductive? Does Mary truly believe that people aren't wonderfully varied human beings, each with their own flaws and strengths and desires? No, we're all just slight variations of the same template, one male, one female? What a sad and inaccurate thing to believe, especially when one has a kid. But anyway, somewhere along the way, Mary lost her faith in progress, interesting wording, by which she doesn't mean that humanity will progress as a species, but that it's actually not better after all.
We tell this story to ourselves, it's just in the air, about how it's always better to go forward than to go backwards, that somehow the world is progressing away from something bad and towards something good, that things which happened in the past and people in the past were always less ignorant than we are. Yeah, I mean, you know the framework I'm talking about. It's just everywhere. It's the sort of ambient belief system. I came to realize just that I didn't believe in it anymore.
So, does she think things and people were better back then? Because that's kind of what it sounds like, and I'm really struggling with the idea that someone would seriously say, yes, the 1800s, 1600s, 1200s, send me back, it was better then. But anyway, all this is how reactionary feminism was born.
You have to imagine me pushing my buggy around small town England with a little baby in it. You do that a lot. And so there I am with my buggy, and all of this stuff kind of goes around my head because it's not like your brain stops working just because you're a mum. It's not like you stop being a thinking human being just because you're a stay-at-home mum. And so here I am thinking about progress, and I'm thinking about feminism, and I'm thinking about what life is like, especially after all of my antenatal group peers started going back to work. I started thinking about the question of work and the question of privilege, and the luxury of being able to be a stay-at-home mum, and it made me. I came to realize a lot of the things that I believed just seemed to be kind of backwards. Like, a lot of the things I just assumed were true. I was like, hang on, I've got all of this backwards. This isn't oppressive. Maybe for some people it's oppressive, but I don't feel like I'm oppressed. Who is actually being oppressed here, and according to who? And furthermore, if I still think of myself as a feminist, but I don't believe in progress, is that even possible?
If you don't believe in progress, what is your goal as a feminist? To reinforce the status quo? Anyway, it's interesting to me that Mary recognized that she had a privilege in being able to choose whether or not to return to paid work, but apparently she didn't engage with what would make someone say being a stay-at-home mother is oppressive. An individual making an individual choice is not oppressing herself. Though I would like to add that choices aren't made in a vacuum, so though someone can freely choose to be a stay-at-home mother, that is the choice society smiles upon. And what society prefers is an easier choice to make, though when it's obvious what choice the world at large prefers you to make, is that really a choice? Like in those unethical birth control studies that took place in Puerto Rico in the 1950s, where women had a choice of try this experimental drug or be sterilized, that's not really a choice. And no, that is not me comparing motherhood to mandatory sterilization. Anyway, what would be oppressive is society, government, spouse saying, no, you can't do this, you must do that. Mary is incredibly lucky that she had the choice to stay home with her child instead of being told that's what she must do by her husband or by being fired because she was pregnant. And again, the bad thing about that isn't that you're spending time with your baby instead of getting paid, but that leaves you with no resources should the situation become one you need to leave. Also, oppression isn't based on how an individual feels about a decision they made. Moving on.
You can be a feminist if you don't believe in progress, and furthermore, if you want to be a feminist, you shouldn't believe in progress. Was the conclusion I came to in the end.
So basically, read her book. Though, well, I'll save my thoughts on this for my patrons. Anyway, Lila asks what about feminism Mary is in support of, which I think is a great question. And there must be something for Mary to continue calling herself a feminist.
The overall frame, really the overall argument of feminism against progress, is that the women's movement is not evidence of progress as such. This isn't just something, we didn't just wake up one day and decide to become better people collectively, in some abstract way. That's not what happened. What actually happened was that men and women together, but particularly women, for reasons I'll get to, needed to respond to the way life was changed by the Industrial Revolution. And that's fundamentally what drove the women's movement. In earlier civilizations, in pre-modern England, and really into the 19th century in the United States.
Okay, but that doesn't answer why Mary calls herself a feminist in the 21st century. TLDR, Mary talks about the Industrial Revolution, the Sexual Revolution, maternalism, and how feminism of freedom won because of the pill. And,
So if you like, this is industrialization round 2, which I think of as the industrialization of women's bodies through birth control and also through the legalization of abortion. Because at that point you have a technology which seems to get rid of the main physiological difference between men and women.
Ma'am, abortion is not some new 20th century thing, and women have always tried to control their fertility. It just wasn't until the 1950s that a reliable method to do so was found. Doctors didn't give women the idea to control how many kids they had and when. That is something women have always wanted control over, and I think Mary, in her 21st century perspective, isn't really thinking about why that might be. Also, Mary thinks the pill is a first step into a transhumanist future because it takes something which is normal, fertility, and breaks it.
Instead of fixing something which is broken to try and restore us to normal, it takes something which is working fine, which is normal female fertility, and breaks it in the name of personal freedom. And that's a total inversion of what every doctor has done up until that point.
What really baffles me about people who say this is that they are free to not take the pill or any form of birth control. If they don't like it, if they don't trust it, whatever, that is their right. But that they feel the need to paint it as something that breaks women. Is she aware that the pill is used for things besides preventing pregnancy? She has a kid, so she knows pregnancy isn't a neutral state. She should understand why women might not want to experience that, and as someone who had a kid later, she should also understand why women would want to put it off until they're in a more stable place. I guess her thought process only extended so far as to, I'm privileged to be able to decide if I want to stay home or not. Anyway, after telling us that birth control breaks what is working, Mary informs us that this opens a door for us to upgrade ourselves. That doesn't even make sense.
So, I mean, if I can break my fertility in the name of having sex whenever I want with whoever I want, why shouldn't I interfere with my normal physiology in any number of other ways? Just because I want to.
I feel pretty confident that people don't go on birth control so they can have sex with however many people they want. I also feel pretty confident that they don't need Mary's permission, but that is quite a leap. Does Mary not think people should have control over their own bodies? Because that's kind of what this sounds like.
This is also the moment where the maternalists just lost. If previously in the women's movement there had been those women who wanted to make the case for mothers and for women as birthing mothers and as caregiving people, and to say that there are affordances of being a mother which we need to make space for, and there are ways in which women are different, and particularly when we're mothers, that we need to make space for, and this is a political question. That form of feminism was just lost when abortion was made legal.
No, it wasn't. Feminism supports things that support parents, which includes mothers, like parental leave, healthcare, livable wages, affordable housing, the list goes on. And you can do both. It's not abortion or motherhood. In fact, that is what reproductive justice is about. The ability to have the family you want, not just access to abortion. And I would like to remind everyone,
if you choose care over freedom, then the societal construct today is, well, that's fully on you then.
It's not feminists or leftists saying that people are on their own due to the government shutdown, nor are they the ones making videos about how it's good, actually, to not have SNAP. And yes, we will be talking about that shortly. Anyway, they move on to euthanasia, and I'm realizing Mary never answered Lila's question about what it is she supports about feminism, which honestly sounds like nothing. She doesn't even know how feminism supports motherhood. Well, I guess she's decided it doesn't, and her thought process stopped there. Anyway, we're moving on, and I'm really not sure what they're talking about, so I'm just going to skip this section.
You were talking about the economic contributions, effectively, of women in, say, the Middle Ages and, a 19th century pre the Industrial Revolution, and how things just, changed dramatically with the Industrial Revolution, men leaving the home. The household economy was now very different. Textiles and food and all the, animal husbandry, all the things that typically would happen on the kind of family household project are now changing rapidly. But the core of part of the core of what you were saying is that, women had economic value, obviously for the sake of raising their kids with their spouses, but in order to develop the economy around their household so that they could raise their kids and feed themselves and shelter themselves, et cetera. And, part of the change that happened was that now it wasn't needed anymore. Those economic contributions in those ways were not needed anymore. And then you have the 1940s, housewife stereotype, right, who has the refrigerator and she has the washing machine and she has all of these tools that make her job theoretically even easier. And then you have Betty Friedan writing in The Feminine Mystique that this, 1940s housewife is so miserable. Like she's just she's basically bored out of her mind. She's stuck alone in suburbia with the white picket fence. She's divided away from society or, work that's contributing to the economy. And she's just with these very tiny children that need her so desperately. And she's lonely as can be. And she has this she's terribly disaffected. And so we've got to get her back into the workforce, right? So I'm curious how do you see that narrative? First of all, do you agree with that framing, or is there something we're missing with the puzzle? Let's start with that.
If you understand what Lila was asking, please let me know below. Anyway, Lila asks Mary what she thinks the solution is today, and Mary says she doesn't think there is one, so Lila asks for some solutions instead.
Part of where liberal feminism has gone wrong is in proposing that, in fact, all of women's interests are identical, and that's just obviously not true.
I think Mary and I, being from different continents, might have a different idea of what liberal feminism is, so keeping that in mind, I will say I don't think liberal feminism thinks all women are the same, but that it does confine itself to capitalist interests. This is where you can find the idea that, we just need more female CEOs. Women need to lean in at work. If I wear this feminist t-shirt, that's enough feminism for the day, which, in my opinion, isn't enough. And that is also why I'm an intersectional feminist. But having said that, Mary does have some solutions, though now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember them introducing a problem to the conversation. Whatever, here's Mary's solutions. You'll never guess.
Particularly in the context of, extremely, digitally advanced, post-industrial, highly networked, Western, kind of increasingly post-liberal, say, middle and upper class Britain and America. I have some thoughts. I have some suggestions. One of them is that we need to be getting married. I recommend, to me, marriage is a no-brainer if you want, it's straightforwardly a feminist project to be encouraging and supporting marriage. From the kind of radically atomized point of view of middle and upper class life in 20th century Britain and America, it's a complete no-brainer. Like, why would you not want to look for a good man who's got your back?
Not being sexually or romantically interested in men could be a reason, but anyway.
But this is not to say any old marriage. I'm very keen on. I think we need to rethink what it's for, and I think we need to rethink what we're filtering for. This sort of capstone marriage, which has become the norm now, where people wait until much later and they see it as kind of the icing on the cake of personal fulfillment. I think that's thinking about it wrong. And actually, what we need to be seeing getting married as an enabling condition for life in common, and particularly for kids. And we should possibly be filtering less for the big romance.
I have to admit, this is a new one. Mary thinks people are waiting to get married later because they're holding out for love, and that's a bad thing. Now, correlation doesn't equal causation, but divorce rates have been trending downward as marriage age rates have been trending upwards, so maybe holding out for someone you want to do life with instead of getting married to get married is better.
And the one in the rom-com sense, and more for loyalty, for shared values, and for the long haul, really. And we should be thinking about it in those terms.
I'm sorry, does she think people don't do that now? What does she think people get married for? Well, she mentioned the great romance, so maybe she thinks people just marry whoever gives them that fluttery feeling in their stomach. It's weird. I would think people marrying later are holding out for someone who shares their values and such, as recommended, not just someone who gives them the great romance, but Mary seems to think otherwise.
And the reason I say this is actually because I don't believe in never-ending progress. And I think, life might go on getting richer and more safer and more comfortable for a tiny minority in extremely wealthy parts of the world. But for a lot of people, it's going in the opposite direction. And that means for a lot of women, it's going in the opposite direction. And I think about my own daughter, who's 7, and I think about the world she's going to grow up in. And I think, would I rather tell her that she can girl boss it all on her own and have her go into adult life with those beliefs, or would I rather encourage her to find a good guy who's going to have her back?
Actually, yes, you should encourage your kid to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, as well as to be able to ask for help and offer it when the need arises. And not just from a romantic partner, but from friends and family. The more people that have your back, the better. And the more backs you have, the better as well. Society is a community effort, not an individual one. And if society works together, that progress Mary dismisses could come to pass. For that matter, it has. We've improved our lifespans, reduced poverty, reduced hunger, and the only thing stopping us from further progress is folks with more money than they can spend in their lifetime, and folks like Mary who, instead of deciding that fighting for change is worth it, gets paid to discourage us from even thinking it's possible. And I just can't with people like this. If you don't believe in progress, fine, go sit in the corner and be a fatalist with your friends. Or publish a book about it and go on interviews talking about how it's all hopeless.
Given the poly crisis, given possible climate change, given rising crime rates, given all of the other things which seem to be going pear-shaped, what should I be encouraging her to do? It's pretty obvious.
I see. Mary will encourage her daughter to marry because she thinks that will make her safer. That's unfortunate because the most dangerous place for a woman is in her own home. That doesn't mean women shouldn't marry or get involved with men. It just means that marriage doesn't guarantee safety.
Maybe she'll be lucky, but maybe she won't.
I'm not sure what that means.
And the prerequisites in your view, Mary, for that, because there's a big debate about that. When to get married, how to marry. I know you're recommending don't just go for this romantic, ideal rom-com, the one perfect experience of the thing. Look for the shared values, look for the person that has your back. But I think there is a recommendation for many to, get your college degree, put a few years into the workforce, get yourself in an economically good place. And this is for the message for both men and women. And then, you hit your 30s, you hit a certain period of time, and then you get married once you've got establishment, a certain level of economic establishment taken place. What's your take on that?
I think Princeton mum was right. She got so much blowback for saying that you're never going to be more surrounded by eligible men than when you're at college. But I don't know, I think she was right. For that kind of elite women, you're never going to be as surrounded by eligible men as you will be at college.
Get the Mrs. degree.
It's not terrible advice.
For anyone wondering, in March 2013, Princeton grad and mother Susan Patton posted a letter to young women advising them to find a husband on campus. I'm not sure when Mary thinks these college students should get married, but I have to say, if you think basing a relationship off a romantic ideal is a bad idea, maybe don't advise people to get married in their early 20s? Anyway, Mary says that if we want good men, we need to leave men alone to hang out with each other a little bit more, and what? Where are men banned from doing this? And I would actually say the opposite. If you want good men, they should cultivate friendships with other men and women, partly so they don't come to rely on their romantic relationship to provide all their social needs, and partly so they realize women are human and not just potential romantic partners. And no, men having some beers with their friends is not sexist, and yes, saying women can't go to clubs and bars where networking is done and deals are made is. Do these folks ever engage with someone honestly? Anyway, Mary says this is point number 3, and I think she skipped one, but now Mary is going to make the feminist case against birth control.
To be clear, this is an anti-universalist argument. I'm not saying I'm not even necessarily making this case for everybody. I wouldn't recommend to somebody who has low social status or is in a violent relationship or has no personal capacity for self-control necessarily to reject the pill if that was going to keep her safe. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to somebody with no impulse control. But for women who are otherwise have their thing together, who are capable of self-control and who are capable of maintaining personal boundaries, you should not be on birth control. You should not be on the pill. It messes with your mind. It makes you fat and mad and sexless, and it reorders you as a kind of commodity for consumption in a way which is profoundly counter to your interests.
Feel free to disagree with my interpretation. Full disclosure, I am feeling a bit snarky, but it sounds to me like Mary just said, birth control will make you fat, mad, and sexless, and it makes you a commodity for consumption, but that's fine for the poors. If you're not poor, however, please don't take it. You're too valuable. You should be having babies. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is really addressed more towards bourgeois women in the developed world than anywhere else. But for that demographic, there's a strong feminist case against contraception.
I get Mary's perspective, though I don't agree with it. And no, that doesn't mean I think people should be having kids when they're in an unstable situation. But what was the feminist part? In my opinion, a feminist case about the pill would be to consult with your doctor and do what is right for you and your family, not to tell women you think should be having kids that they should go off birth control.
And so that's point 3 on my slightly eccentric set of feminist program for renewal out the other side of liberal feminism and into the reactionary kind.
So get married and have kids. What was third? Did I miss it? Or was that go off birth control? Anyway, Mary says reactionary feminists started off as a joke and then someone asked about it so she had to define it, and now...
But I mean, I think it's become a very empty signifier in the West, feminism. The liberals want it just to be the doctrine of whatever and wherever and whoever for anyone. It's just, the doctrine of total gratification of individual desire is just what feminism means for the liberals. But then... So it's sort of content free at that end, and I think why shouldn't we take it back? It does mean something. Women still exist. We're still distinct from men in some politically important ways. Why shouldn't we have it back? Why shouldn't we take our ball and go home? It could just as easily be ours as theirs. So I'm gonna have it back.
I'm with you. Equal but different, and to not reject the differences and instead to celebrate them and encourage them, I think is the key to help women be fully. Not free, but fully, I think, whole. And then the same with men. I mean, and yes, fully free towards the end of wholeness. Freedom, that word has been so perverted today to mean, endless choices for any reason, as opposed to what are my responsibilities, what is my purpose, and aiming your choices, your freedom towards those things.
I have to question how interested Mary is in feminism if she doesn't know there's other kinds besides liberal. Anarcha, post-colonial, eco, radical, Marxist. I also question where the feminism comes in when your beliefs align with conservatives. And honestly, this strikes me as just passing the buck. Your individual choices will make you or break you, and if it's the latter, well, too bad, you made the wrong choice. Hands washed completely, as if we don't have a responsibility to one another. Which is kind of funny, since Lala says that's what feminism is about. Personal freedom over what we might owe to society and to the earth. But anyway, should I read Mary's book? I really want to know how she draws the conclusion that progress is not... I don't even know at this point. It sounded originally as though she just thought it wasn't possible, but now I question whether or not she thinks it's something we should even strive for. Her book is only 256 pages, and the description tells us something. Quote, modern feminism increasingly benefits only a small class of professional women. There is no reason to sacrifice everyone else's happiness for their sake. Mary Harrington shows that women's liberation was less the result of moral progress than an effect of the material consequences of the Industrial Revolution. We've now left the industrial era for the digital age, in which technology is liberating us from natural limits and embodied sex differences. This shift may benefit the elites, but it also makes it easier to commodify women's bodies, human intimacy, and female reproductive abilities. Feminism has been captured by well-off white-collar women who use it to advance their own economic and political interests under the pretense that these are the interests of all women, all the while wielding the term like a club against anyone, male or female, who dissents. Feminism against progress is a stark warning against a dystopian future in which poor women become little more than convenient sources of body parts to be harvested and wombs to be rented by the rich. Progress no longer benefits the majority of women, and only a feminism that is skeptical of it can truly defend their interests in the 21st century. End quote. I'm again doubting Mary's knowledge of feminism because, well, first, everyone benefits from having the choice of how to live their lives. Second, books have been written by feminists critiquing white feminism. And finally, feminists do have ethical concerns about surrogacy. In my brain, it goes something like this. Well, women should be allowed to decide what they want to do with their body, but would surrogacy be something she's doing if she didn't need the money? Okay, we'll just take the money out of the equation. But if a woman needs money and that's something she's able to do, is it wrong to prevent her from making money when she really needs it? Who am I to tell another woman she's being exploited? Do I think she's stupid? Can you really make a choice when the choice is between rent and food? You can see how it goes. And I always land on, perhaps some things shouldn't be available for purchase. Maybe we should rethink capitalism. And that is the problem here. Capitalism. I kind of wish I could say this to them just to see the looks on their faces. But that is the issue here. Feminism is yet again being blamed for a problem caused by capitalism. Also, What is Mary's solution to this? Is she under the impression that poor women were treated better before the Industrial Revolution? I have too many thoughts and questions just from the description, so I guess I do have to read the book. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like if you enjoyed the video, dislike if you didn't, subscribe if you found yourself enjoying my content in general and aren't yet subscribed, and let me know what you think below. I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. My socials, sources, and resources are linked below, and Merry Solstice!